Most people think their life will change when they become rich. They imagine a big moment, a visible shift, a number that feels dramatic enough to signal that everything is finally different. Maybe it's $1 million. Maybe it's some version of financial freedom. Maybe it's just the idea of never worrying about money again. But in reality, that's not how it happens. Your life doesn't change all at once. It changes quietly, in stages, and those stages are tied to specific net worth milestones that almost nobody talks about, not because they're complicated, but because they're not exciting enough to sell. Today, I want to walk you through 3 of those milestones, not the flashy ones, but the ones that actually change how money works in your life, psychologically, practically, and over the long term. My name is Daniel. This channel is about understanding money through real numbers, long-term thinking, and practical systems. If that's useful to you, take a second to like the video, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which of these milestones you're closest to. It helps the channel, and it gives me a better sense of what to break down next. Now let's start with the first milestone. The first milestone is not about wealth, it's about stability. And for most people, it happens somewhere around $20,000 in net worth, assuming that number represents a fully funded emergency reserve and not debt cancellation or temporary cash. What this milestone really represents is your exit from survival mode. Before this point, money feels fragile. Every expense carries weight. Every decision has consequences that feel immediate and sometimes uncomfortable. You're not just thinking about whether something is worth it, you're thinking about whether it's safe. And that difference matters more than people realize. When you're operating with little or no buffer, your brain prioritizes short-term survival. You become more conservative, more reactive, and less willing to take calculated risks that could improve your situation over time. This shows up everywhere. It shows up in the jobs you accept, the opportunities you ignore, the conversations you avoid, and even the way you negotiate. You don't ask for more because you can't afford to lose what you already have. But once you build a real financial buffer, something that can cover your life for a few months without income, something changes. You don't become reckless, you become less fragile. An unexpected expense is no longer a crisis. A delay in income is no longer catastrophic. A decision doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be reasonable. And that shift creates space. Space to think, space to plan, space to choose. It's not exciting, but it's foundational. Because until you leave survival mode, you're not really building wealth, you're just managing risk. If you're currently working toward this first milestone, understand that what you're building is not just money, you're building stability, and stability is what allows everything else to happen. Now, if this already makes sense to you, this is where I'd encourage you to pause for a second and engage with the video. Not because it helps me, although it does, but because it helps reinforce what you're learning. Like the video if this is hitting home so far, subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this, and in the comments, tell me where you are right now. Are you still building your first financial buffer, or have you already crossed it? Now let's move to the second milestone, because this is where things start to get interesting. The second milestone is where money starts to work back, and for most people, this happens somewhere between $100,000 and $250,000 in net worth, depending on how that money is allocated and how consistently it's invested. This is the point where your net worth begins to generate noticeable movement without requiring proportional effort. Before this stage, progress is almost entirely dependent on your income and your savings rate. You earn, you save, you invest, and your net worth increases, but it increases because of what you're doing. At this second milestone, something subtle changes. Your money starts contributing in a way that you can actually feel. A market increase doesn't just add a few dollars, it adds something meaningful. A good year in your investments can equal several months of your own contributions, and for the first time, you begin to experience what it feels like for your money to participate in the process. This is where compounding stops being theoretical and becomes observable. But the more important shift isn't the return, it's your behavior. You start thinking differently. You become less focused on saving every small dollar and more focused on optimizing bigger decisions. You begin to understand that a 10% improvement in income or investment structure matters more than cutting minor expenses. You stop trying to control everything and start trying to direct what matters. And that changes how you approach your entire financial life. You're no longer asking, how do I survive this month? You're asking, how do I position myself for the next 5 to 10 years? That shift is quiet, but it's powerful, because it moves you from effort-driven progress to system-driven progress. Now, let's slow down here for a moment, because this is a stage where people often get distracted. They start chasing better strategies, higher returns, or more complex investments, thinking that's what will accelerate their growth. But at this level, consistency still matters more than optimization. The difference is that consistency now has leverage, and leverage applied over time creates momentum. If you've reached this second milestone or you're approaching it, this is where I'd like you to comment. What's been the biggest challenge so far? Has it been income, discipline, or consistency? And if you're finding this kind of breakdown useful, don't forget to subscribe. This is exactly the type of clarity we focus on here. Now let's move to the third milestone, because this is where things start to get interesting. The third milestone is not about survival or momentum, it's about optionality. And for most people, this begins somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million in net worth, depending on lifestyle, expenses, and investment structure. At this level, your money doesn't just support you, it starts to create choices, not in limited freedom, but real tangible flexibility. Your investments can generate meaningful annual returns, not enough to fully replace income in most cases, but enough to influence decisions. You can reduce workload, change direction, take breaks, or pursue opportunities that don't immediately maximize income. And this is where the biggest shift happens, not in your bank account, in your relationship with time. You stop making every decision based purely on financial necessity. You start considering quality of life, alignment, and long-term direction. Work becomes something you choose more intentionally, not something you're forced into continuously. And perhaps more importantly, stress changes, not because problems disappear, but because fewer problems are existential. You're no longer one mistake away from starting over. You have margin, and margin changes everything. But here's the part most people misunderstand about this level. It doesn't feel the way they expect. It's not dramatic. It's not flashy. It's not a visible transformation. It's quiet. It shows up in smaller decisions, the ability to say no, the ability to wait, the ability to think long-term without pressure. And ironically, the people who reach this stage often become less interested in proving anything to anyone, because the value is no longer in appearance, it's in control. Now, if you step back and look at all three milestones together, something becomes clear. Each one changes a different part of your life. The first removes fear. The second creates momentum. The third introduces freedom. And none of them require extraordinary income or luck. They require time, consistency, and an understanding of how money actually behaves over long periods. If there's one thing I want you to take from this video, it's this. Wealth is not a single destination, it's a series of thresholds, and each threshold changes the game just enough to make the next one possible. If this helped you see money differently, take a moment to like the video, subscribe for more content like this, and comment below which milestone you're currently working toward. No hype, no shortcuts, just clarity. And I'll see you in the next one.
Like the video if this helped. Subscribe for more real estate and finance clarity.